You see them in the videos for Who Can It Be Now and Down Under where they're goofing around and they look like they're like having such a good time and that they're friends and they're buddies. But Colin says that it was pretty much at that time that it was clear to him that this was a band that was not going to last very long, that cracks were showing already.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock. Conversations with authors, musicians, and insiders revealing the stories behind classic rock's greatest songs, albums, and artists. I'm Eric Senich. Before we get started, if you'd like to support the podcast, get episodes commercial-free, sign up for the Backstage Pass from Patreon for just $5 a month. Link in the show notes, or you can go to bookedonrock.com. Now on to our guest, a returning guest, a Booked on Rock Hall of Famer, Greg Prato, who has a brand new book out titled Down Under, the Men at Work and Colin Hay Story. Greg, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Eric, hello.
Everybody knows the name Men at Work, but we know little to nothing about their formative years, what became of them. Why do you think that is? Is there a lack of interest, or have the band members been unwilling to talk about it other than Colin?
You know, it's very strange because if you think about it, they were probably one of the most visual or most seen bands early on in MTV with the videos for Who Can It Be Now, Down Under, Be Good Johnny. Also, of course, the ballad Overkill was also a very popular video on MTV. So it's funny how they were probably one of the most visual bands and most covered bands at the time. And yet they just disappeared like pretty quickly. You know, I mean, from in 1983, they played the US Festival just below headliners The Clash on the US Festival's New Wave Day. And within about 2 or 3 years later, they're just totally gone, finished, and forgotten, which is very difficult to do. I mean, with a band that was that covered and that successful, and you know, I mean, you know, it's also people know the songs, but like they don't know, like, for instance, Colin Hay's name necessarily. So like they'll know Men at Work. They may even know Business as Usual as the album, but you mentioned Colin Hay or Greg Ham or Ron Streicher, and they're like, who? You know?
Right.
So it's
this is a band who also won a Grammy, Best New Artist.
Exactly. Yeah, and Colin Hay has a funny thing. He's gone on record saying it's the 1983 Best New Artist Award, aka Kiss of Death Award, because right after that, their career. Well, after that, they still had some success with their second album, Cargo, which some people tend to point to that as a sophomore slump album, and it really wasn't. It was a very, very good album, and it did have hits on it. Just that the problem with that, which I talk about in the book, they rush released it because some people don't know Business as Usual came out in 1981 in their native land of Australia. It didn't come out until 1982 here in the States. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to show that they still had an allegiance to their homeland. So Business as Usual hits in the US in like late 82 is when it starts its number one run of, I believe, 15 consecutive weeks, which is insane if you think about it. But even before that starts, I think they already finished work on their second album because they wanted to put it out, meaning like judging from the timeline of when it came out in Australia. So that was a year before the US. Really what should have been done, and this is what even Colin Hay admits now looking back, they should have waited and not put out Cargo so quickly. They put out Cargo, I think, when Business as Usual was either still number one or it was definitely still in the top 10. I know that. And there was even a period of time where Business as Usual was above Cargo in the top 10 or even on like the charts. So it was not too wise to, yes. So it just wasn't wise to put it out so fast is what I'm trying to say.
The opening chapter is about Colin Hay before the band even exists. So let's talk about that. Where's he from? He had a dad who owned a record store, so that was an advantage for him.
Yes, he's from Scotland originally, and they had to move eventually because he had I believe he says, a wheezing problem. I guess he had either allergies or something like that. So I think just as he was about to be turn into a teenager around that time, but he had already discovered the Beatles, and his father owned a music store. He sold instruments, and they also sold records. So Colin says how he always felt like he had a little bit of an in because he would always get the record. He would always hear the records before all his school chums would hear them. So he'd hear the Beatles and the Kinks and the Who and all these and the Stones, all these classic records and bands before the public would actually hear it. So, and that's when he started to learn guitar. But it wasn't, I think, until he moved to Australia that and I think he moved right around, I believe it was right around the time of Sergeant Pepper, if I'm not mistaken, because he says that's an album that always reminds him of like the move, and that was an album that really left a lasting impression on him. I think inspired him to start taking music more seriously, and that's when he started playing with bands. And by the early 70s, he's in pub rock bands, playing pubs and also hotels. In Australia at the time, there were a lot of pub rock type things and hotels to play. And yeah, I don't know if I mentioned already. Yeah, so from Scotland, they moved to Australia, where the weather where they moved was a little bit better, so just to help his like health problem.
Yeah, that's where he meets Ron Stryker. So all this begins as those two guys, an acoustic duo. So how did they meet, and then how does the rest of the band Men at Work come together?
Yeah, they just met just through playing music, the local scene. I know that Colin Hay meets Greg Ham, who's the flautist and also saxophone player, through mutual friends. I think he even met Greg Ham before he met Ron Stryker. But yeah, Ron Stryker, he meets in the early to mid 70s, and they're not playing rock music. They're not playing rock music. They're playing acoustic folk type stuff. And I think they were really into some of the bands he lists that he really liked were, I think, Steely Dan. He also liked Nick Drake, who is a underrated folk singer, guitarist, who has a tragic tale. He died early on, I think, from a drug overdose, but he became kind of like a cult figure after his passing, and he has a whole
Pink
legion
Moon.
of fans. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, great song.
Exactly, yeah. So, yeah, they started playing together a bit, and then by the late 70s, they got involved in a musical, some like obscure musical in Australia, and then one by one, through also going to college, they met other people. They met the bassist, they met the drummer, and then Men at Work slowly forms. And again, it's playing hotels primarily and also clubs. There was like a whole circuit around the whole Melbourne area. And yeah, by 79, 80, they were so big that they had to stop playing hotels because it was too small for them.
The name Men at Work, it's become iconic. Its origin is very simple, right?
Pretty simple, yeah. For a while, they would be playing and they didn't have a name. It would just say, tonight, Ron and Colin, or Colin and Ron, until I forget who suggested Men at Work. I think it may have been someone who worked at one of the hotels or bars that they were playing at. And they just kind of liked the whole Men at Work thing because similar to the US, you'd always see these Men at Work signs with, people working on roads and construction and things like that. So that, I guess just made sense for them at the time. So why not, right?
And it was fitting, and they were working hard, right? They were playing constantly.
Constantly, yes. Yeah, yeah. They were a very hardworking band, and that's what pretty much made them so tight, and that's what improved the songs. When you're playing every night, is what Colin says too. You get instant you get instant feedback from the crowd you're playing in front of. What works, what doesn't work. And he says something interesting too, that I think to him, he quickly realized that he wrote the best songs of the band. That he said there was like, going into it, it was going to be a democracy. So if anyone had a new song, they would play it in front of a band. But then he realized at one point, we're just kind of wasting time with these other songs that aren't going anywhere. Whereas he was the one that was writing all the songs that eventually became the classics. So, he does have a point that, it's almost like similar to the Police with, Sting is this insanely talented, prolific songwriter. You have Andy Summers and Stuart Copeland, who are also very talented. And they wrote some, good songs for the Police, but it's a quantum leap what Sting is writing compared to what Andy Summers and also Stuart Copeland is writing. And that was similar to also the setup within Men at Work as well.
And Colin tells you in the interviews that you've done with him, he could tell early on that the cracks start to show even early in that first year or two.
To me, just as a fan at the time and like looking back, it's like so weird. You see them in the videos for Who Can It Be Now and Down Under where they're goofing around and they look like they're like having such a good time and that they're friends and they're buddies. But yeah, Colin says that it was pretty much at that time that it was clear to him that this was a band that was not going to last very long, that cracks were showing already. It seems like him and Greg Ham were the closest. Ron Strikert and him, it seemed like they started to kind of gradually drift apart. And the bassist and the drummer, they had a whole other viewpoint of how the business should be run and who uh, they were kind of saying that certain band members should be fired and like all. And they also didn't like the fact that Men at Work's manager was a old college friend of Collins who, granted, it's a gentleman whose name right now escapes me, but he didn't go on. I give him credit that he did a good job managing Men at Work because their career skyrocketed, but he never went on to do anything after Men at Work. So the bassist and the drummer were saying we got to get rid of him and get a real manager. And Colin Hay puts his foot down and says, "No, I don't. I want to stay with this manager." And that was also a main reason why they broke up is there was like a whole the bassist and also drummer, who I should say the bassist's name is John Reese and the drummer's name is Jerry Spicer. I should put that there. But yeah, the manager, so Colin sticks by the manager, and then by Cargo they're already drifting apart, and then after the Cargo tour is over, the bassist and the drummer are excused from the band.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, none of us knew that was going on. You're watching on MTV, just like you said. They seem like they're all getting along great. The
Yeah,
album's blowing up. Everything's good, right?
I mean, but it's so baffling why even like the manager wouldn't have been like, look, it's just like it's the same with, of course, Van Halen is the biggest example of this. Like, guys, just sit down, let's talk this over, let's work this out. Fine, you're not getting along. All right, we're gonna take 2 months off. We're doing nothing for 2 months. Just leave, and we're gonna come back in 2 months, and we're gonna work this out. Or like to use Van Halen as an example, like um, Eddie and Dave, I want you guys just to go away for the weekend together someplace. I want you to work out your differences. Come back when you finally work things out. We're going to pick, just little, things like that, or, it just seems like it could have been worked out so easily, but who knows? I guess age has to do with it. They were young at the time. You don't, maybe you think it's, well, we were this successful once. Colin maybe was thinking, oh, I could just launch a solo career and I'll have just as much success, or the Men at Work rhythm section is like, oh, we'll just, pick up where with some other band or, something like that. But of course, it's very difficult when you get that type of chemistry within a band and, the friction. Sometimes it's not pleasant to be in a band with friction, but that's what makes your Police so great, your Van Halen so great, the Ramones so great is that friction.
The Cricketer's Arms. I was scanning through the book. I was trying to remember the name of the club.
Yes,
that was the big place there where they really worked on perfecting their sound and really gelling as a band. The Cricketer's Arms. So if anybody who's listening from Australia right now or watching, I'm sure they recognize that name.
Yep. Yeah, and if you ever get the chance, go on YouTube. There's an interesting clip that I came across while I was doing research for the book. Greg Ham and also Colin Hay go back and visit it around like 1985, like right around the time they put out their third album, Two Hearts, and it's a little tiny like bar. It's pretty crazy to think that a band like Men at Work, that just a few years later, again they were opening up for Fleetwood Mac, opening up for David Bowie, and then of course they're second only below the Clash at the 1983 Us Festival on the New Wave night.
327 Punt Road, Richmond, Victoria. You even got that in the book.
Sounds right. Yes, sounds
you
correct.
Did your homework. All right, so the debut album, Business as Usual, huge commercial and critical success. Here's some stats here. Released November 9th, 1981. It spent 15 weeks at number one on the U.S. Billboard 200 from late 82 into early 1983. 5 weeks at number one in the U.K. in early 83. Who Can It Be Now and Down Under, both number one singles in the U.S. Surprising to learn how personal Who Can It Be Now was compared to how humorous it sounds, right? What's the story behind that?
Colin Hay says he was living in a flat, which is another word for a apartment, and he was unemployed. But there was some. He talks about this in the book that there was some kind of slight scam that they were playing in a band and making money, but it was probably either paid in cash, so you didn't really have to report it to the tax man. But then he wasn't working to also get like I guess unemployment checks on top of it. So he was always paranoid whenever we would hear people coming up the door, knocking on his door. There was maybe going to be someone checking to see if he was pulling a scam or if he was looking for work or something like that. He also talks about that there was a gentleman that lived right across the hallway from him that he thinks may have been selling drugs. So he would also get knocks at the door for people looking for that guy, which he again thinks it may have been someone selling drugs. They may have confused him. So it was kind of paranoia. It was kind of like a paranoid type thing,
Who
and
can
that
it
was
be
pretty much
knocking at my door?
yes. So that was kind of the inspiration for that, and the video reflects that a little bit with the classic scene where you see all these weird guys going up the hallway. There's a alien, I think, and there's a few other people. There's one of the men at work, gentleman dressed as a woman. I remember it's all in that video.
But now it makes sense. Who can it be knocking at my door, tiptoe across the floor?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can't you see he'll knock all day?
Yeah.
I'll be trapped in here. I have to stay.
Yeah. Down Under has
Yes.
become almost an unofficial Australian anthem. One of my favorite revelations in the book is that the famous flute intro to Down Under almost never happened. Producer Peter, is it McKeon?
McKeon.
It's
Yep.
McKeon. He deserves a lot of credit here on this whole album. Talk about this particular song, though. Originally, a bass line opened the song.
Yeah, before the album came out, they actually put out a single, and it was a song called Key Punch Operator on side A, which was never on any Men at Work albums. And the B side was actually Down Under. If you listen to the single version is different than the album version that eventually came out. And the single version sounds almost like a completely different song. It's a slower tempo, and it also begins. It's not the flute playing the famous melody. It's a fretless bass, and it's not nearly as catchy and not nearly as bright and upbeat. It's almost like a morose, depressing type sound, like sounding version of it. So yeah, Peter McKeon definitely deserves a lot of credit for saying no. We have to switch things around. The same also to back up for the song called "Who Can It Be Now." Originally live, that had a whole other beginning part of the song, and it wasn't until almost not halfway through, but like a good minute in the song that the now classic saxophone part comes in. But Peter McKeon heard that and said, "No, no, no! You got to cut out that whole minute. Has to start right away with a drum bit and then right into the saxophone part." And Colin Hay was like, "Oh yeah, I never thought about that." And again, that's what we remember about that song. And also with the song Down Under, if it was a fretless bass, it sounds not nearly as appealing. But with the flute, that's the whole entire hook, and that's what made the song such a classic.
And the other single is Be Good Johnny, hit number 78 on Billboard. And Colin talked to you about that song, which he co-wrote with Greg Ham. And growing up, I always thought it was just a funny song about a mischievous kid. But after reading your chapter, I came away thinking it's really about celebrating people who don't quite fit society's expectations, right? What was your takeaway?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It may be also a little bit autobiographical for Colin because he talks about that he only likes to daydream, and I'm thinking maybe that would have to do with a little bit maybe when he was younger and maybe even moving to Australia, maybe before he made friends or something like that. Maybe that's a reflection of that. But interestingly enough, when I did research for the book, to the best of my knowledge, Be Good Johnny was never issued as a single in America, which is baffling because it had a very popular video being played all the time on MTV. I remember it was right around holidays of 1982. It was being played a lot, and the song was played a lot on the radio, and it was on the charts like for album rock, whatever. But yeah, I don't think it was ever issued as a single in the States. It was issued elsewhere, but never in the States, which is kind of strange. Something I talk about in the book too is this was like right before albums like Thriller, showed you that you could have more than one single, you could have multiple videos. Like at that point, really most albums, you were lucky if you got two videos max, or two singles max. Then the record company wanted you on to the next album. And then it wasn't really until, say, like Def Leppard Hysteria, where it's like, oh, you could have like five or six singles and videos.
7,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
The
All right, there
total
you
was
go.
7.
Seven, right? Yeah,
That was the
exactly.
magic
So
number. Yeah.
yeah, so then you could really milk these albums. So yeah, so an album like Business as Usual definitely I think could have had a larger shelf life if they maybe spaced out the singles and the video. They probably could have done more videos if they wanted, but it was on to the next album, I think, a little too prematurely, personally.
Well, yeah, because there are other songs on that album that could have been hits.
Absolutely. And the same also with Cargo, too. There's songs, one of the best, which we'll get to when we talk to Cargo. I think, talk about Cargo. I think the best song on Cargo was never even issued as a single.
That's one we will get to.
Yep.
Yeah. Business as Usual. Let's see. What were the other tracks on there?
I can see it in your eyes. It's probably one of my favorite
Sure.
Men at Work songs. And Colin says that was actually being considered for the first single off the album, but then they eventually rightfully decided to go with Who Can It Be Now, which is clearly the more correct choice. But I love the song called Underground is great.
I
That
was
has a
about
great
to say that.
saxophone
That's
part.
another
Yeah.
one.
That has a
That's
great saxophone part. I love Touching the Untouchables is great. Catch a Star is great. And
Down
then
by the Sea.
Down by the Sea is such a classic, amazing song. I love that song so much, and something else that Colin is very, you got to give him credit. He's very complimentary towards smoking marijuana concerning writing a lot of these songs.
Yeah.
Talks a lot about how, like, that song in particular, it was a certain type of pot. It was something tripping grass, it was called, and he said he smoked that, and he just was playing a chord, and I forget the chord he said, but he was like, I just was sitting on this one chord, and it was such like a nice sounding chord, and that became Down by the Sea, which is one of my favorite Men at Work songs. And when you see them play it live, there's some full length concerts from 82, 83 on YouTube you could find. And when they do that song live, it's like a whole other epic type song. I highly recommend try to find the live versions of that song.
Yeah. Well, Vegemite sandwich has become one of those. It's just
So
something that people talk about. There it is, the Vegemite sandwich, right on the back of the book.
I have to confess something. I said to myself before this book comes out, I'm going to find Vegemite and eat it just so I could say what it tasted like, and I just never got around to it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a spread.
It is a spread. Yes, I actually asked Colin Hay, and it's something to do with yeast. It's a yeast extract. It's related to beer, but it's not like, alcohol. But yeah, and it's not like I don't think it's a sweet tasting thing. I think you put it, so you put it on toast. And then I saw, like, people also put other stuff on it though now too. But I think you put bread, butter, and also Vegemite, I think. But there are people, like, I interviewed Alan Hunter, one of the original MTV VJs, and he said he once ate it, or someone on him, like the MTV crew, tried it, and they said it was absolutely disgusting. Yeah.
Well, he brings up a great point in the book. Their videos were funny. They were low budget, full of personality.
They never took themselves too seriously. And Alan Hunter made an interesting observation that the videos may have created such a lighthearted image that they overshadowed just how strong the songwriting actually was. Do you agree with that? Possibly. I think what really hurt them the most is Rush releasing the second album, and also, the manager again, because he's only mentioned like a few times in the book. His name right now escapes me, but
I'll look it up here.
Okay. Yeah, I think that if they had a manager who was maybe more experienced, he would have probably said, guys, we should just take some time off, and we shouldn't split up the band, and we shouldn't excuse the bassist and the drummer. We should take some time off and let things simmer for a little bit and come back strong. But
Russell Depler?
Russell Depler, there you go. Yeah, he was a college chum of Colin's, who said, if you ever put a band together, I could, try to help out. And from that, but again, to his credit, he was the manager during their success, so he obviously knew what buttons to push. But as far as keeping that lineup together, didn't do that good of a job.
Here's a question: if MTV never existed, would Men at Work would they still be remembered as one of the defining bands of the early '80s?
That's hard to say. Probably not, because. But then again, you could say the same about Duran Duran. You could maybe even say the same about Quiet Riot. Like all these bands that used MTV to their advantage. I mean, would Def Leppard, Pyromania have been as popular without the videos for Photograph and also Rock of Ages? I don't know. You
Right.
know, I mean, even something like the Kiss "Lick It Up" video that created such a buzz because they took off their makeup. You know, would if it wasn't around, if it was just like, oh, in the next issue of Hit Parader, there's a picture of Kiss with no makeup, would that have, resonated as much as the Look It Up video being played as much as it was on MTV? Probably not. So there's certain bands that definitely benefited greatly, and Men at Work was definitely one of the bands that benefited the most from MTV and also their videos.
Yeah, I just think the songs are so good that they outlived the video.
Yeah, no,
I
absolutely.
mean,
Yeah, the
they're
playing was
still
great.
being played to this day on the radio.
Yes,
On
yeah, and something else I talk about in the book. Colin Hay is a very underrated guitarist. I didn't know until, or do you want to wait till we get to?
and songwriter.
Yes,
Yeah.
and songwriter. There's a song "Cargo" that I'm talking about with the guitar. Should we wait
Oh
for?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. We'll wait till we get to
let's
"Cargo."
get to that now. Yeah,
Okay.
that's I mean the book tackles one of rock's classic questions. How do you follow a blockbuster debut? And they followed with Cargo in late April 1983. What did you discover about the pressure that they felt while making Cargo?
Funny enough, there was no pressure because they completed the album before the album took off they completed Cargo before Business as Usual took off in America, so it was in the can pretty much. Um, I personally think it would have been better served for the band not to have recorded it then. They should have completed touring for Business as Usual, then gone and recorded it. Because one thing about Men at Work, they played a lot of unreleased songs live during that tour. There's a lot of live recordings out there. There was one very good album that came out a few years back called Live at Christchurch 1982, which was on Spotify for a while, and then it just vanished off Spotify. And almost half of the album is songs that were never on any Men at Work albums. And some of the songs are good. Some of them are, you could see why they weren't on albums, but they're all decent songs. And if they were maybe fine tuned a little bit better, they could have been on albums. But yeah, so the pressure, they really wasn't pressure because they had the album done, they had the songs done, and to their credit, it maybe wasn't as front to back like stellar as Business as Usual, but it was maybe just like a touch less. It was like, for instance, I mentioned Quiet Riot. There's a huge difference between Mental Health and then the follow up Condition Critical. It's just
Oh
like
yeah,
two totally different. Like there's one album you could see why it was such a big MTV hit and everything, and the other one is like, oh my god, this sounds like demo. I mean, I don't know what, doesn't even sound like the same band. Whereas Cargo sounds like a follow up that maybe just would have benefited a little bit more if you just waited a little bit longer. But
yeah.
the
That's why this is all like reading the book. This is like news to me because I always looked at that second album. I never looked at it as, geez, what could have been, or it was a sophomore. I mean, Dr. Heckle and Mr. Jive, Overkill, It's a Mistake are all on there. And Highwire
High
like
Wire was a
huge hit,
popular
but it's
video on
a
MTV.
great song. That's four solid singles, and two huge. Overkill and It's a Mistake were two huge hits. And
But
maybe
we also have to remember that the best song that would have probably been the biggest hit, a song called "Blue for You," was never even issued as a single
can
or
you
video.
imagine if they did? Yeah,
And when I
great song.
interviewed Colin Hay not that long ago, I was like, "Why was that never released as a single?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, the label thought Dr. Heckle and Mr. Jive," and I was like, "All right, I mean that's a novelty song, but to me, Blue for You has a clear reggae vibe, but it's like reggae pop. It would have totally, I think the people that love Down Under would have definitely gotten into that as well. It would have kind of connected the dots. I think that was a top 10 single that was very easy. It should have been spotted, but it wasn't, and
Sure.
just slipped through the cracks. And then also they were playing a song on the tour called The Longest Night, which was never on a Men at Work studio album, which to me is a complete travesty because it's one of their great songs. And they played it live, but never, they didn't even put it on the third album, which it should have been on the third album because it was played during the Cargo tour, which I don't understand why. I guess maybe if you're in the band and too close to it, you sometimes can't differentiate which songs are better than others, or like which songs should make the cut, which ones shouldn't. That's, I guess, why you need a good producer or a good manager to say, hey, this song we need to focus on. This song is the video, et cetera, et cetera.
The Longest Night. I feel like is that on Spotify or is that
Yeah, I believe there's live versions. Men at Work put out a live album in the '90s called, it was just simply titled Brazil. And I think what it is they went back and recorded a studio version, but that was a live album with just just one studio track, and it was that. But that wasn't the original band anymore. It was just Colin Hay and Greg Ham at that point with some session type guys filling in.
But again, the stats, I mean, they speak of themselves. The album peaked at number 1 in Australia, 3 on Billboard, 8 in the UK. It sold 3 million copies in the US. Dr. Heckle and Mr. Jive, number 28. Overkill, number 3.
Overkill was a very big hit.
It's a Mistake, number 6.
Yes.
Top 10 single.
Exactly. And the thing, too, that I talk about.
How many bands would kill to have that?
I know.
Like, if that's a debut album, that's a success story right there.
Well, that's what I talk about in the book, that there's zillions of bands would give their left arm to have their second album be that successful. I mean, they actually did it's so difficult for bands to avoid the sophomore slump, and Men at Work miraculously did it, and they just fumbled the ball, which is completely maddening. Like they actually made it over the hump. They did all the heavy lifting. They pulled off what they needed to do, and then instead of, again, them just saying, guys, let's just take the next year off. We're done. We'll come back in late 1984. We're going to come back. But no, they just, pretty much pissed it all away, which is such a travesty.
Well, that's where we're at now. What followed was what would be the final Men at Work album, 1985's Two Hearts.
You know what? Let me just quickly jump into. I
Sure.
also something I talk about in the book.
Oh, you want to talk about a solo
yes,
too?
Colin Hay is, besides being a great singer, great songwriter, great performer too. We see his videos, like how he's a very like nutty, wacky, entertaining performer. But his guitar playing is very underrated. I always assumed he was just a very good rhythm player, but in the video for the song called Overkill, that has one of my favorite guitar solos. I love that guitar solo. It's like a Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits type solo. But the video, all you see is just the close-ups of fingers, the fingers on the frets and the guy playing. So I always assumed it was Ron Streichert playing it. Then going back and doing research for the book, watching actual live versions, it's none other than Colin Hay playing it. So Colin Hay is a very underrated guitarist, and he also, watching a lot of the live stuff, he also does other he does other solos too. On the first album, Business as Usual, a song I mentioned before called "I Can See It in Your Eyes" has a great guitar solo, and that's him. Again, it's a very melodic, tasteful Mark Knopfler type solos, and those are like my favorite types of solos. I mean, we talked about, of course, the great Eddie Van Halen many times. Of course, I like that he's technically gifted, but my favorite Eddie Van Halen things are when he's not shredding. It's when the beginning of Mean Street is like one of my favorite. I absolutely love that. And he, of course,
fits the song perfectly. It complements the song, and it's understated.
Exactly. The solo in the middle of the song ain't talking about love. All it is just one simple single thing, and it fits the song perfectly. It doesn't have to be a Yngwie Malmsteen type shred thing,
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. 1985's Two Hearts. None of the singles were big hits. Everything I Need peaked at number 47 on Billboard. Not too bad. But the other singles were Maria, Hard Luck Story, and Sail to You. Colin Hay later said that by the time Two Hearts came around, quote, the band was over, even if they didn't realize it yet. So who exits the band and why? We've just got 2 members now on this.
Yes. Okay. So Okay, so what happens is after the Cargo tour is done, John Reese, the bassist, and also Jerry Spicer, the drummer, they're both excused via phone, I believe. Colin Hay calls them and says his quote is, "Your services are no longer needed," is what he says, which again, I mean, you would like to think the manager would have been like, "Hey, Colin, I don't think that's a good idea. Let's just try to talk this through. Let's work this out with everybody." Or meet. They could have met halfway. Like, all right, look, we'll have. There's bands that have two managers manage, or like, we can. Why don't we bring in a manager that we all, can all agree on, or something like that? But no, it was either, that was it. And so those guys leave. Then it's Colin Hay, Greg Ham, and also Ron Streichert stay together. They work on okay, and then they also decide not to use the producer Peter McKeon on this third album, which is a big mistake. Because if you something else I didn't talk about, you listen back to those two albums, Business as Usual and also Cargo, they're not dated sounding. They have a very timeless sound about them, and that's why they have aged so well. And that's a huge part of that is, of course, Peter McKeon's production. And I talk about this in the book too. It's crazy to think about. You would have thought that he would have been a much in-demand producer after two huge albums. Yeah, you would have thought like big bands would try to go after him, but he never really, turned into a big name, much sought after producer. It's very strange. So, and he sadly passed away not that long ago, maybe like a year or two ago. He passed
Uh,
away. So it's sad he never really. I mean, he of course was successful with the Men at Work, but he never got the call to, produce the Cars or, Def Leppard or Pat Benatar. Although I think he wrote a song for Pat Benatar and wrote a song for Barbara Streisand, but he never got to produce any other big 80s bands, which is a shame because I think he would have done a very good job and he probably would have, a lot of these dated sounding 80s productions probably would have sounded better with him as the producer.
Greg Ham and Colin Hay produced Two Hearts.
Two
And
Hearts, and that's why Two Hearts doesn't. That has a dated sound. It's very processed drums. It's
the
that
drums, yeah.
exactly. It's that horrible '80s gated drum, where it's like a cannon, which I can't stand. That it just sounds very dated. The material's not as good. There's some songs that are okay, like the song "Everything I Need." I like a lot.
Yep.
That's a good song, but I can't help but hear it. If it had the Peter McKeon production, if it had the other guys on it, if it had the business as usual production, it would have been so much better. And I think you needed Peter McKeon to say, guys, like half these songs aren't nearly as good. We got to, go back. And what's crazy, they actually had songs on the shelf that were better than a lot of these songs. Like the song "The Longest Night" should have been on this album, but for some reason it wasn't. It makes absolutely no sense why you had all these other songs that could have easily been on this album and they just sat there and never got released.
Well, I did give the songs a listen over the weekend,
Uh-huh.
after reading the book and getting ready for the interview. And I gotta say, I gotta defend some of these songs, like "Man with Two Hearts." I like
Okay.
"Everything I Need." I like. I think "Sail to You" is a good tune. I always like "Maria" because they included that on a best of.
Yeah, best of, yeah.
I think "Hard Luck Story" is another one. "Snakes and Ladders" I like too.
Just it's hard for me to listen to it and not think what could have been. And also the fact that it's pretty much the sound of a band just like on its like last legs.
Yeah,
So it's like one of those types of things that
but I feel like "Giving Up" is another one too. I think I might even dig. I got to listen to it again.
yeah, I just can't. It's like one of those things I just can't hear it without just seeing the band breaking up pretty much in front of our eyes, and also it should have they should have Peter McKeon producing. It just would
Sure.
have been so much better. But
What I remember is getting their best of in the late 80s when I was in high school and having no clue what Maria was. I didn't know where those songs were from.
oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
"Snakes and Ladders," "Maria," "Man with Two." That's how disinterested I was in Men at Work, right? I mean, and a
Well,
lot of people were.
what that is. That's a sneaky label ploy or a label maneuver. A lot of times when a band puts out an album that doesn't sell well, they'll put out a best of after it. I know, for instance, Rat did this. Well, not Rat, but Rat's label did this. They put out. You had me on a while back talking about the book I did about Rat. They put out an album called Detonator, which was not one of their better albums, and they put out a best of shortly thereafter. And like I half the songs almost are songs from that album.
Yeah.
And it's similar to this also Men at Work thing is like the record labels, well, why don't we pad it with songs from this album that no one really knows? Who knows? Maybe one of these songs will become a hit or, maybe, something will happen, who knows? But that's just you're kind of taking advantage of the poor bastard who's buying the CD who now isn't
Yeah.
getting turned on to, grade A material. Now you have this grade B and also grade C doo-doo.
Well, what's funny is I can't even see. I'm looking on Wikipedia. I can't even. It might have been one of those cheesy best of compilations that wasn't even a major label deal. It was
Oh, okay.
because I just seem to remember getting it in the late 80s, and they didn't. They put out a best of 81 to 85 in 1985. Maybe I bought that
I
in the
think
late
the
80s.
one you may have had was called Contraband. That
I
came out in
think
the
that's the
90s.
one.
That came out in the
So
90s.
maybe it was in the 90s that I got it.
Yeah, because that one I remember I bought for a friend, and I remember listening to it with him, and I'm like, wait a second, like I don't even know half these
Right.
songs, and it was because it was half the songs that were on. Yeah, and something else too I forgot to mention. Men at Work put out a lot of non-album B-sides for Cargo and also Business as Usual, and again, not all of them, but a few of those songs are better than what was on Two Hearts. So again they needed someone like Peter McKeon to say, guys, like, some of these songs just are not nearly as good as what we had before. We got to make sure at least it's up to par quality wise, the material, but that never happened.
The album peaked at 16 in Australia, 50 on the US chart, and that was it.
At that point, honestly, I wasn't that big into Men at Work anymore. Like, I bought the two albums when they came out. By 85, I'm pretty much really into heavy metal at this point. But I remember still watching MTV, and I have no recollection of seeing any of those Men at Work videos from the Two Hearts. It was just like that album just came and went so fast. It's insane to think that how popular they were just a year or two before to just it's like someone just flicked a switch, It's
I
crazy.
mean, if they were playing him, it might have been late at night in the overnight,
Yeah.
So after everything that happened with Men at Work, Colin Hay made that decision to abandon the band name altogether, move forward as a solo artist. How difficult was that for him?
Yeah, at first it was difficult. He says he pretty much had to start from scratch because he admits that aside from like diehard Men at Work fans, the name Colin Hay never really, Sting connected with the masses, David Lee Roth connected with the masses, like their names. But for some reason, the name Colin Hay never connected with the masses. I mean, people know him from his look, but they don't know his, lesser known people don't know his name necessarily. So it took him a few years, but to his credit, he never stopped touring and putting out solo albums. So he was able to build up a solo career and also a following. And then he also, like I talk about in the book, he got the call to be a member of Ringo Starr's All-Star Band. And he's been a regular member of that for like the past like almost decade or something like that, which in turn has brought a whole new level of interest to Men at Work. And also, bands and artists have covered Men at Work. Men at Work songs are on TikTok all the time. They're in TV shows and things like that. So I talk about in the book, Men at Work now may be not, they're not as popular as they were in 82, 83, but I'd say they're definitely second to that. Like I'd say 82, 83 was their peak. And like I would say now is, right kind of below that just as far as people, still listening to the music, it popping up, people covering it, just the awareness of those songs in commercials and things like that.
Sure.
So, and
You've
then also
got
now, Colin Hay tours as Men at Work, even though uh, he's the only real Men at Work member from the good old days.
but you got two mega hit songs that everybody knows. Who Can It Be Now, Down Under. You got at least a handful of songs that everybody recognizes. I mean, he could throw off of that, and he's got a full set right there. And I remember hearing his acoustic version of Who Can It Be Now. I don't know
Yes.
where that's on,
He's very,
but
very,
I've heard it on TV shows and everything. Man,
yes,
it's really
he's
good.
incredibly talented, a incredibly talented gentleman. It's kind of baffling that his solo career. I mean, because he has great solo songs and solo albums. He has a great song called "Waiting for My New Life to Begin," which is a classic. It's a classic song amongst his fans, and that's a solo song. And yeah, you hear his solo albums, and there's always like some songs like, oh, this could have been a good Men at Work song back in '83, or or this would have been better than the Two Hearts album if he just put this out as a Men at Work album back in '85. But
Yeah. And he's got a
yes,
distinct voice too.
he
To
does.
me, if you hear it, you know it's him if you're of a certain age group.
Hmm.
So when the band was inducted into, I think it's pronounced the Area Hall of Fame, it's the
Yes.
Australian Recording Industry Association's Hall of Fame in 1994. It was one of the few times the original members shared a stage again. Did that moment create any genuine hope for a full reunion?
Well, it wasn't all the members; it was four of them. The guitarist Ron Streicher did not show up.
Okay.
But that's one of the few times that Greg Ham and also Colin Hay showed up or were in the same spot as the bassist and drummer who they split from, John Reese and also Jerry Spicer. So yeah, they were all on the same stage, and Colin Hay said in the microphone, he's like, "It's a shame." He said something like to this, like, "It's a shame that it takes something like this for us to all be on the same stage together." Which you would think fans hearing that at the time must have gotten their hopes up, saying, "Oh, maybe this means that the classic Men at Work lineup will get back together." And it meant Men at Work did eventually get back together a few years later, but just Colin Hay and also Greg Ham, not the other guys.
Thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. 1996, Colin and Greg Ham, they revived Men at Work. They toured South America with new musicians. Were there ever any serious discussions during that period, which was 96 and 98, about expanding the lineup into a full reunion? Or was it understood from the beginning that this was just Colin and Greg?
No, it was known, it was just understood it was going to be Colin and Greg because A, you can make more money that way, right? And then also B, Colin says that, well, later on, there was some problems between Ron and also Colin. Ron was arrested over making threats or something like that against Colin. Colin, when I interviewed Colin about a year ago, I asked him, are you still in contact with any of the surviving Men at Work members? Because sadly, Greg Ham passed away a few years back. But I asked him, are you in contact with any of the other surviving members? And his answer was just no. And that was it.
And that's it.
Didn't expand on it. And I didn't want to, pursue that because it's clearly he just has that behind him and he's just happy he tours with the same band as a solo artist and also as Men at Work. Just when he plays as a solo artist, he plays more solo songs with some Men at Work songs, of course, in there. Men at Work, when he tours as Men at Work, is primarily just Men at Work with maybe like just one or two solo songs.
Yeah. Colin, he's got publishing on all these, right?
He does.
His
Yeah,
name on these.
He either wrote or co-wrote almost all the songs on those albums. All the hits he either wrote or co-wrote.
He's got to be set.
Yeah, then something we talk about, though, is there was a whole legal problem with Down Under about 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
A publishing company came out of the woodwork and said that Down Under had a similar melody line to a Australian children's song called Kookaburra in the Old Gum Tree or something like that, which me as a United States gentleman, I never heard that song before. But you hear it, and the melody's, kind of similar, but I don't know. I think it was pretty much just someone trying to look for money, and they wanted something insane, like 50 or 60% of the publishing or something crazy. And Colin Hay was forced to take him to court, and he claims he had to blow like millions of dollars in fees, but he said it was worth it because he's not gonna, bend over and take it just because a guy's threatening you, So he fought them, yeah, and then he was able to. So they worked out a deal that this publisher got, I think, something like 10% of or something like that, but not nearly as much as they wanted. But sadly, Colin has a theory that he thinks that played a role in Greg Ham's depression, and he also developed a drinking problem. Greg Ham did, and that led to his passing. Just because Greg Ham was depressed, that he felt that people would always think of him as the gentleman that played the flute part in Down Under, and that they would think of him as like a ripoff artist. Which
Nobody would have thought
no,
that.
I know exactly. Like
It's so sad to read about that. The lawsuit was in '09, and then Greg Ham died of a heart attack. I think
yeah.
we could look it up.
Yeah, and he was also like depressed, and yeah, like I said, Colin said he developed a drinking thing was his quote later in his life.
Man. Yeah, he died in April of 2012 at the age of 58, and it really devastated him.
He did. Yeah, he said to this day, yeah, to this day, he said it still upsets him that Greg Ham passed away. He said he always envisioned him and Greg growing old together, and yeah, still possibly playing music and having fun together. But yeah, it just wasn't meant to be, sadly.
Well, yeah. Did you feel it was important to remind readers that Greg Ham's legacy should be defined by his extraordinary musicianship rather than the lawsuit?
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. Yeah, people don't know. I don't think really took. He taught himself the flute and saxophone and all these things, which is crazy. If you
Just
think
picked it
about
up.
it,
It was his sister that said she came home from school, or somebody that said they
yeah,
just saw
he
him playing.
lived with he lived with a house full of people, and there was a woman that lived there who played flute a little bit, and he would just take the flute when she wasn't there and play it. But what he said, which was kind of disgusting, is after you play a flute, you got to clean it because you get spit and saliva, and he would just take it and put it back in the case and just. And when the woman noticed it, she's like, "Oh, well, now you could pay me, and this is yours now." And he paid it, but then he took it as, I guess, a sign to learn it, and he taught himself flute, and he was a great flute solo. I mean, I put him up there with Ian Anderson, right?
It's great. Yeah, that's it's terrible that he actually that weighed on him so heavily, because the fans certainly wouldn't have viewed him that way. And
No, I would have. Yeah, I mean, I never ever would have thought of that.
it was mentioned during a game show, right? It was just an, oh, by the way,
I think it was. I think so.
the host
Yeah,
made mention of it, and the musician or whoever owned publishing on it was watching and said, "Oh, well, I think I should just sue them." Like there was that.
yeah. What
Crazy.
it was the original writer of the song passed away in the late '80s, and somehow his publishing then got transferred to someone else.
And that person saw the TV show.
I don't know if they saw the TV show, but somehow they put two and two together, possibly that, and then then they went after. They didn't even go after Greg Ham. They went after Ron Strikert and also Colin Hay. I believe those are the two. Let me double check that. I'm pretty sure those are the two gentlemen that wrote Down Under. Yes.
Yeah, which made Greg probably feel worse.
Yes, because he played
Putting them through
flute,
all of that bullshit
so.
that they shouldn't have to. One thing I appreciated about the final chapters is that you update readers on what everyone is doing today. What did they go on to do, and which former members' post-Men at Work journey surprised you the most, if at all?
Well, probably the one that surprised me the most is the drummer, Jerry Spicer, became a teacher.
Okay.
So that's what he went on. He actually, after he left Men at Work, he was in a very short-lived band with Peter McKeon. I forget the name of the band, but they weren't very good, and I talk about it in the book. They only put out one album, and it sounds like Genesis, like '80s Genesis, but not nearly as good.
Yeah. Okay.
So, which is a shame because he was actually a great drummer. That's the one thing you watch Men at Work shows from '82, '83. They're all great musicians, great singers. That very sad that such a talented band just it's one of those bands similar to my beloved Blind Melon that just you wish there was more albums of that classic lineup. I just wish there was more Shannon Hoon Blind Melon. I wish there was more of Men at Work with that business as usual lineup. With Peter McKeon as the producer. But the bassist still plays in he lives in, I believe, Australia, and he plays in like a local band. Greg Ham sadly deceased. Colin Hay, we know, still plays solo and plays as part of Ringo Starr's All-Star Band. And then Ron Strikert, interestingly enough, in the '90s or early 2000s, he put out an album that I never heard of until I was doing research for this book. And it's like Middle Eastern music. And it reminded me a lot of the George Harrison songs, the Middle Eastern sounding songs he did with the Beatles. And some of the songs are very interesting, very melodic. And all I could think of is like, this would have been so interesting if like one of these songs was on a Men at Work album with Colin Hay singing. It really would have been so unique and so cool to have like one of the, because again, it's a very unique sounding song. It's Middle Eastern, but it is melodic, has pop type things. So it's just sad that they just couldn't get along and they no longer are even in contact with each other. Because I would love to hear what Ron Streichert and Colin A could do if they were to get together and collaborate again. But sadly, I think that ship has sailed a long time ago.
The Booked on Rock podcast is part of the Boneless Podcasting Network. If you're a fan of classic rock and classic film like I am, go to boneless.lovable.app to find over 20 great shows there. That's boneless.lovable.app, or just go to bookedonrock.com, the Boneless Podcasting Network. It is what you want it to be. Listen with confidence. It's just great that a book is out on this band because they certainly deserved it. Down Under, the Men at Work and Colin Hay Story. The cover, again, by your
Mary
wife?
Prato.
Yeah, Mary Prato, yep.
Yeah.
Cover by Mary. Yeah, it's out now. It just came out.
Yeah, it just came out. It's available as paperback, hardcover, and Kindle, and very shortly, audio version with me doing the whole narration. And again, the reason why I've done all my books, and especially this book, is I always wanted to read a book about Men at Work and also Colin Hay. It really has nothing, it's funny, like all these books I've done, I've never done a book think like, oh, this, I just want to do a book that's going to, supposedly make me a lot of money. Of course, I will take the money if it comes my way, but
Gladly take the money.
But
No,
every
you love the
single book,
underdogs. You love the underdogs.
but every single book I've ever done, it's a subject that I found interesting and that I wanted there to be a book about, that I wanted to read about. And so yeah, that's why what happened was, I talk about in the book too. So I loved Men at Work when they first came out. I had Business as Usual and Cargo. Like a lot of other people, I lost interest after that. Pretty much just because I got into heavy metal at that point, and just that. But then in the early 90s, I started to listen to all styles of music, like, because alternative rock and grunge kind of broadened my listening at that point. So then I started listening to, jazz and funk and all other styles of music. And then there was a weird thing like, oh, let me listen to some of the stuff I used to listen to. And then I remember I bought Business as Usual on CD around 92, 93, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, I forgot how good this is. And then I got Cargo, and I was like, wow, Cargo is great too. And I just never bothered to get Two Hearts because I just didn't remember. I didn't buy it when it came out, so I didn't know any of it. But yeah, listening back to it, it just never really floated my boat.
Yep. But this book answers the question I think a lot of people were asking. What the hell happened? This band was huge, and it simply was really a matter of, it just wasn't a democracy as Colin Hay had hoped. It's just that he was the guy. He was writing the songs, and there's no way it was going to work. From day one, I think he pretty much knew.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's just crazy how there's no way to predict if a band is going to, looking at Men at Work in 82, 83, you would say, look, especially after 83, after they, like I said, avoided the whole dreaded sophomore jinx, sophomore slump thing, you think, all right, well, now they're just home free. Now they just have to, so that's it. They were able to do it. But no, they just totally imploded. It's weird how just there's no way to predict if a band is going to stay together or not. How a band like Pearl Jam stays together for decades, but a band like Men at Work is only supposed to be there for 2 or 3 albums. The same with Jane's Addiction, Blind Melon with Shannon Hoon. There's certain, and I've Van Halen with David Lee Roth was, I guess, only good for those albums. Of course, not counting A Different Kind of Truth, but that Van Halen with David Lee Roth lineup was only meant to be 78 to 84, I guess.
Yeah. But can you imagine like Men at Work getting Mutt Lange to do their next album?
Yeah.
Like the Cars did.
Yeah, I know.
And just get in there and really like say, hey guys, your first 2 albums were great. Let's take this up a notch,
Yeah, that would have been great. Or honestly, I mean, really, they should have just stuck with Peter McKee. And I mean, I feel the same way we talked about the last time I was on about Smashing Pumpkins. I think they should have just stuck with Butch Vig as their producer. As soon as Butch Vig left, I lost total interest, and I never really liked another Smashing Pumpkins album. Or there were certain songs I thought were okay, but no album of the Smashing Pumpkins ever came close to what I felt about Gish and Siamese Dream. And the same with also Men at Work after Business as Usual, and also
Cargo.
Cargo. It was never the same.
Yeah.
That's why you got to get this book to
You
learn
gotta
the
get
truth.
the book. Got to get the book. All right, Greg. Thank you. Let's plug wherever people can find you online, social media. Also, you write for Ultimate Guitar. So
Yes. You're right. For Ultimate Guitar, All Music, write a little bit for all these places. And go to Amazon.com, do a search for Greg Prato. That's where you could find this book, Down Under, The Men at Work, and Colin Hay Story, as well as all my other books that I've talked about every book on the show.
I
Right?
think we've covered, I mean, except for the sports ones. I'll get a sports podcast so we can have you on to talk
Sports
about.
one we'll just skip over. But yeah, pretty much every single music one we've talked about. And then also you can go to x.com/Greg Prato Writer. I'm always posting my latest articles for Ultimate Guitar and also All Music there. So you can check that. And I'm also posting when I have my new books and also interviews that I do. Like, for instance, I'll share this link to this interview. And since I'm always about giving you scoops,
Oh boy, here we
I have a
go.
book coming out for the holiday season, because the holiday season, you got to put a book out, right? You have to.
But yeah, of course. To warm
Unfortunately,
the
I can't
hearts of
now.
all Greg Prato fans.
Yes. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you who it is exactly, but I will give you a hint. It deals with a pop culture icon, an
Okay.
all-time pop culture icon.
All right. And is it music related? Do we have
There is an aspect of music. He was not a musician, but this. Oh, well, wait, I said he. So,
okay?
all right, you know what? I'm just going to say who it is. Scott Baio.
Oh wow,
No,
the legendary Scott Baio.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, it's a.
Hey, I speaking of that, you remember Joni and Chachi, right?
Yes, of course
Okay.
I do. Yeah.
I met what was her name?
Erin Moran.
Erin Moran, right?
Yeah.
I went to
Sadly,
sadly
she
gone.
passed away. Yeah.
I went to a horror festival once. This is like, I don't know, 15 years ago, whatever.
Uh-huh.
And at the table is the guy who plays Michael Myers in the first movie. There's like 3 different ones, but he's the one where like Jamie Lee pulls the mask off.
Okay.
And right?
Right.
Tony Moran. I start chatting with the guy. He's like, yeah, my sister's and it was an actress too. She was on Happy Days. I'm like, what?
Oh.
They're Tony Moran and Aaron Moran. They're brothers and
And
sisters.
then also sitting at that table wasn't also Gary Sharon at that table as well?
Gary Sharon was there, and he's just looking around. He's like, "Is anybody going to come to me and ask me to sign an autograph?" No, I'm like, stop it, stop it. But yeah, okay. So it's a pop culture.
Yeah, pop culture icon, and there is definitely music elements to it. And I did interview well-known musicians for it. So yeah, there is definitely
Cool.
a music connection. So yeah, you have to have me back on. Have
Yeah,
to.
well, yeah. I mean, we're counting the days here. We're counting the days. All right, Greg. Thanks as always. Go out and get that book on Men at Work. It's out now. Greg Prato. Thank you, sir. As always.
Thank you, Eric. Adios.
That's it. It's in the books.